Lonely HumanFarmer rescued 2 albino dragons from poachers. He never thought they'd choose him as their father. The wind carried the scent of smoke and blood. Garen pulled his coat tighter and squinted over the frostbitten fields at the edge of his farm. His land sat quiet. 20 acres of stubborn soil and silence on a remote frontier moon. No one cared a name. Crops barely grew. The trade routes had dried up. He lived alone. By choice, he often told himself. But that didn't mean it didn't ache sometimes. That morning, he'd been tending his withering crop of thorn grain when his drone sensors pinged an alert. Movement along the western ridge. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes scavengers passed through. But this signal wasn't moving on. It had stopped near the tree line. And the smoke, it wasn't from a campfire. It smelled like burning flesh. He mounted his old hover trike, shotgun slung over his shoulder, and rode toward the source. He found them in a clearing surrounded by snapped branches and blood-soaked snow. A group of 4 men stood around a large cage made from electric mesh. Inside huddled 2 creatures, small, pale shapes curled tightly together, shivering. Albino dragons. Garen blinked. He'd seen dragons before, but only from afar, massive, sleek predators who kept to the canyons and volcanoes. But these, they were young, barely the size of sheep. Their scales shimmered white-blue under the dying sunlight, their crimson eyes wide with terror. They'll fetch 10,000 credits each on Galderan, one of the poachers said, kicking the cage. The hatchlings whimpered. The largest man, a brute with cybernetic arms, grinned. Could get more if we trained them first. Garen's blood turned to ice. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't young anymore. But he remembered what it meant to be human. He kicked the hover trike into gear and charged into the clearing like a storm. The poachers shouted, scrambling. One drew a blaster, but Garen fired his shotgun first, aiming for the man's leg. He dropped, screaming. Another ran. The third tried to fight, but took a wrench to the face for his trouble. The cyber-armed leader lunged at him with a roar, but Garen slammed the butt of his shotgun into the man's jaw and sent him crashing to the ground. Breathing hard, Garen stood alone in the quiet aftermath. Snow drifted lazily around the scorched grass. The only sound was the quiet whimpering from the cage. He approached slowly. "It's all right," he said, voice softer than he knew it could be. "I ain't here to hurt you." The 2 albino hatchlings flinched but didn't back away. "Let's get you out of there." Back on the farm, Garen did what he could. He converted the barn into a warm shelter, laying down thermal blankets and heat lamps. The dragons were cautious at first, flinching at every sound. But they didn't try to run. They stayed close to each other, always touching. Siblings, clearly. One had a slightly longer neck and a nick on his right horn. Garen started calling him Nick. The other, smaller and quieter, he called Snowy. He had no idea if they understood. On the 3rd night, while he poured warm water into a trough, he felt a soft touch against his leg. Snowy. She looked up at him with glowing red eyes, unblinking. Garen crouched. "Hey there, girl. You okay?" She blinked, then nudged her head into his chest. He froze, then slowly, awkwardly, wrapped his arms around her small, scaled body. "All right," he whispered. "You're safe now." Weeks passed. Nick recovered quickly, prowling around the barn and chasing farm rats. Snowy remained close to Garen, always watching, always listening. She never made a sound, but sometimes when he looked into her eyes, he felt something like a thought trying to form. He built them a perch above the old silo, repaired the barn roof so they could sunbathe, ordered fresh meat from the nearest outpost, even if it meant cutting into his already thin savings. It didn't matter. They filled something in the silence he hadn't known was hollow. One cold morning, as he sat with his coffee on the porch, Both dragons curled beside him. Garen said out loud, "Suppose I'm not so alone anymore, huh?" Nick flicked his tail. Snowy rested her head on his lap. That evening, he found a half-dead vole left on his pillow. A gift! He laughed until his chest hurt. But peace never lasted long on a moon like this. A week later, a sleek, black transport ship landed near the edge of Garen's property. Mercenaries stepped out, clean armor, polished weapons. At their head stood a woman with silver cybernetic eyes. "Name's Commander Brell," she said. "We're here for 2 stolen assets." Garen stood firm at his gate, shotgun on his back. "Ain't nothing here but 2 creatures I rescued from poachers. They're property of the WIRM Genetic Syndicate," she said coldly. "Registered bioweapons. Stolen from a black site. They're kids. They're weapons. Extremely rare albino mutations. We need them returned for containment. They ain't hurting anyone. That's not your decision." Snowy stepped onto the porch behind Garen. She didn't growl, but the air grew still. Electric. Commander Brell looked at the hatchling. "Step aside, farmer." "I won't. You're going to die for 2 animals?" Garen didn't hesitate. "They're my family." Snowy's eyes pulsed red. Then, for the first time, Garen heard it. Inside his mind, a voice, not spoken aloud, but deeper than sound. "Dad." He froze. Brell saw it too. "Telepathic bond has formed," she muttered. "That complicates things." Nick emerged beside Snowy, wings flaring. "Stand down," one of the mercs barked. The 2 hatchlings let out a synchronized shriek, not loud, but sharp and focused. Lights on the mercs' rifles flickered. Systems glitched. Sparks flew. "EMP burst," someone shouted. Garen moved fast. Shotgun in hand, he fired a warning blast into the air. "Leave. Now!" The mercs scrambled, weapons useless. Brell scowled, but didn't press. "This isn't over," she hissed, boarding her shuttle. "You've made enemies, farmer." Garen didn't reply. Snowy and Nick stood tall beside him, wings beginning to grow wider, stronger. They watched the ship vanish into clouds. After that, he knew they couldn't stay visible. He modified the barn, layered it with signal dampeners, sensor blockers, built a hidden shelter beneath the root cellar, just in case. And every day, the dragons grew. They no longer needed protection, but they never left his side. One night, as stars filled the sky, Snowy curled around him beneath the windmill. Her breath warmed the cold air. Nick lay nearby, tail draped protectively over both. Garen whispered, "You 2 could fly away, find others, be with your kind." Snowy's head lifted. She pressed her snout gently against his forehead. "You are our kind." He choked back a laugh. "And a tear. Guess that makes me your old man, huh?" She purred. Years passed. The farm fell off most maps, officially abandoned. But travelers told strange stories of 2 ghost white dragons soaring above the frost fields, of a human riding beside them, laughing in the wind. Some called it legend, others called it nonsense. But Garen never cared, because he'd once been a lonely farmer, and now he was dad